Okay, Sylvia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm sorry my video has been off. I've got a going away party I'm cooking for, but I've been listening to all your amazing questions and answers. And I'm very impressed that so many people are willing to miss the European soccer going on right now. Tom, mine's, I think, just a quick, slightly playful question, which is one of the things I've been thinking about as I'm trying to develop my intuitive side more is kind of, instinct, and where does it come from, and how do you know things sometimes that it feels like you shouldn't know, and why certain activities that you've never done in your life before feel kind of comfortable, and others are like, oh, this feels really, really new. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you'll do something you've never done before, but it feels familiar somehow. Mm-hmm. Is that like past life experiences? Are you sort of naturally tapping into a different data stream? Like, why does some things just feel like, oh, I can do this even though I've never done it before, versus other things that really feel cold, hard, fresh, and new?
Mm-hmm. Well, some of it could be past life experience, that you've done it before. You have some familiarity with it at a consciousness level, though not with the details of it, but with it. But I suspect that some things just suit you. Some things just naturally kind of resonate with you, and you're going to be naturally good at them just because of the way you are. In other words, they play to your strengths. If you go into a new activity, you've never done it before, but you have all the natural strengths, attitudes, information that you need to do that thing, then it'll just be like you've done it all your life. You'll just slip right into it, and it'll be fine because you bring to it everything you need to do it and do it well. Whereas if you start something and you have to learn new things, new attitudes, a whole new way of keeping score, whatever, you have a lot of new things that you have to figure out, then it feels a little more cold and a little more trouble, and you don't just fit into it so easily. So I think it depends on you, what you're predisposed to, what you're already suited for, how comfortable you can just slip into something with hardly trying, and how much of it do you find that, oh, there's a lot to learn here. I'm going to have to think in a whole different way in order to do this. So I think that's what it is. It's just what suits you.
And do you think I'm really interested in, I've been really interested in certain medical things, some because of issues my kids have had or whatever. I've been really interested in certain ways of thinking. And I know that there's a lot of research and progress in biology and electricity and how, cells communicate with each other, et cetera. And I'm just wondering if any, either past lives or ancestor memories you think actually are biology is going to learn is actually going to be encoded somehow in our, whether it's cells or DNA or some other thing that we haven't discovered yet, whether ancestral memories get encoded in your biology in any way.
Well, not so much memories, but we have this idea that it takes a long time before your genetics, will change. Instincts that are in your genes, it's like they're fixed in there, and they only are going to change ever so slowly. And the things that are actually behavioral, they're also hardwired. There's a lot more of us that's hardwired than we generally think. We think we're a blank slate, and then the environment, writes its story on our blank slate. But we have a lot of predispositions to things. We have a lot of, a lot of behavioral things that are actually, hardwired. And they're not as hard to change, though, as you might think. Our intent modifies biology. It leads. Biology adjusts itself to suit who we are, as consciousness, as people. The biology shifts around so that we can express ourselves physically. So that's one thing, that you can change your biology. And another thing is that if you're, let's just say in one generation, if your mother had some very strong emotional experiences, say maybe she went through a period where she was very upset or very frightened or very happy or very, whatever, that may actually have predisposed you to that, or to the opposite of that. You could be predisposed either way, as a positive or a negative. So even through just one generation, the things we do will often move through to our children. Attitudes, behaviors. Some of it is biological in the sense that, let's say, while you're pregnant with a child, you go through a period of great stress. Well, that stress obviously changes your own physiology. It changes, your levels of various hormones and the stress, the chemicals that you have and so on. And that will affect, that kind of sets up different connections in your fetus, in your child. So when that child is born, they will have some characteristics and attitudes and feelings that go back to that fact that you were stressed, while you were pregnant. So there are things that are just biologically linked like that, but there's other things that are consciousness linked that we change. If we are, if we feel certain ways, particularly if they're strong feelings, that will affect our biology. If we have a lot of fear, if we're one of those persons that just is very, very fearful, that will affect our biology. Our brain chemistry will shift because of that, to express that fear. And then we can go take Prozac or something, to try to shift that biology back, to where it should be. It's that sort of thing. So it is interesting how much of our what we would think of our thoughts, our mental life, how we judge things, how we see the world, is actually part of our physical body. It's not just consciousness. Our physical body has a lot of influence in it. So not so much ancestor memories, but yes, ancestor attitudes, ancestor feelings, ancestors being very stressed, very fearful. Yes, not only do you change, let's say if you were very, like we said, if you were very upset during a pregnancy, that may change your child's central nervous system biochemistry, but then it can change their children. Your grandchild may also still be affected by that change because these are physical changes, and the physical changes can get passed on. So something like being really angry for a week while you were pregnant can affect your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. Likewise, you can be affected by your grandparents and your great-grandparents and what they did and how they felt. But the point is that we're not controlled by it. It's not like it's inevitable and we must act out this way. We just have predispositions. We just have certain things we slip into more easily than others, certain attitudes we have more easily than others. We can always say no and go the other way. We have free will. We're not trapped by our genes, but we are nudged by our genes in any large numbers of ways, and things that most people would attribute to environment. I shouldn't say most. A lot of what's attributed to environment actually has a physical component to it. The environment is very important, but it's not. We're not the blank slate that gets written, by our environment. It doesn't work like that at all. There's a whole lot more of our physiology that is there to reflect our consciousness, our fears, our beliefs. And it does get passed on and passed on and passed on. And I think it dampens out after a while, but it can affect multiple generations. So we do get things from our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our great-great-grandparents that actually are physical things created maybe by emotional or mental things originally, but they become physical things that then get passed on to us and predisposes us to similar kinds of behaviors and attitudes and ideas.
Yeah, it's almost biblical. The sins of the father.
Yeah.
Thank
The
you,
mother.
thank you, Tom. And the mother. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia, you have the greatest laugh in the world. I love your laugh.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Over to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. My question's kind of more like a request for just further comment on some subjects, and Andres actually asked it sort of already, which was interesting to me. So maybe you can just go a little bit further. I've written it out sort of. I say, it seems that those who pay attention to you when you speak will understand that being self-centered is not the direction any of us want to go in if we are trying to lower entropy. Does it then follow that this literally means that each of our lives, in order to be lowest entropy, must be about other constantly and at all times? What I see in my mind is a circle that represents the world, the universe, and everything, in which we usually put ourselves or self in the center. I'm thinking that this is where our greed comes from as well, which is what I'm thinking is behind most of our high entropy thoughts and actions. So this would be greed for praise from others, greed for money, greed for more food than our allotted share, greed for more time to do nothing, greed for being right, greed for attention, greed for having our way, and so on. What I see might be helpful would be taking that self out of center, tossing it aside really far out there so that we are no longer even a remote thought, and then permanently placing in the center other, or aligning ourselves with the LCS, or putting in the center the rules of this low entropy game. This feels good to me. This feels like how to live life in order to lower entropy and progress in what my sister and I call the game. For this, I have the example of my mother as a person who lives entirely for others. I cannot think of a time when she was not doing for others or willing to get up and do for others. For me, she is the most wonderful example. That said, this woman works constantly. She is always working, doing, and being for others. She can, and certainly has, worked hard for 48 hours with no sleep, and then go home and serve the people in her house, or mop a floor, or pray for 2 hours. This woman gives everything. It seems like she lives from your good questions of, how can I help? What can I do? I always say that my mother runs on God juice and has the energy of a room full of 5-year-olds. I can see in a physical way through her that when we live for others, there's no need to be fearful of our own well-being. Like, what will I wear? What will I eat? What about my sleep? What about taking care of me, of treating myself? Therefore, living this other-centered life can be done with no fear. So first, will you please speak more about greed, how to recognize it, and why it does not work? And second, will you please comment a bit further on the idea of living an other-centered life, with the idea in mind that in MBT, you are constantly and consistently telling us that being self-centered does not work?
Okay. Well, in the big picture, greed, as you defined it, all the aspects of being self-centered, it's what about me, right? Is what about me? What about mine, my needs, my wants, my desires? That doesn't work because it's moving in the wrong direction. It's de-evolutionary. It's not contributing to the whole. It's just contributing to yourself. It's not a, so the reason it fails is that it's not a contributor to the whole. Some people have a philosophy that we'd have a perfect world if everybody was just selfish. If everybody just would do, it's just the opposite of what I say, but if everybody would just be motivated for what's best for them, that everything would work out real well. Oh yeah, you're not familiar with that philosophy? No. Yeah, it's a very common thing. Trying to think of the name of the group that does it, and it actually has lots of adherents to it. They find that their idea is that there's some truth in the idea, but a major failure in it, and that is that the truth is that if you are self-centered and you have a big picture and you have a long-term view, then you will always do things that are good for the whole because you're a part of the whole. And in order for yourself to succeed, the whole has to succeed. You can't succeed in a space that everybody else is failing. That doesn't, that won't work. So if you're going to exceed economically, you can only do that if it's a good economy. Everybody's succeeding. If everybody's failing, no matter how clever you are, you're not going to succeed, economically, if the system can't support economic progress. So in that sense, you see, they come up with this idea of selfishness is the right way to be, but it's predicated on having a big picture viewpoint and on a long-term perspective. And if you give it that big picture viewpoint and long-term perspective, then indeed it will work just fine, because what you'll find is that if you are very self-centered, then what you do is give and care about others, because that turns out to be good for you. You see, well, I'm just kind and nice and caring of people because I know that's going to be good for me and my life will be happy if I do that. Well, okay, that's just looking at the same thing from the, kind of from the opposite viewpoint. But the problem with this philosophy is that the adherents to it are almost never in possession of a big picture and almost never thinking in the long term. They're thinking in the short term. What about me now? That's where they're thinking. And then you are doing just the opposite. Now you are hindering the collective. You're hindering the system that you're in, the social system you're a part of. You're making everything more difficult. You think you're making your life better, but you're not. You're making your life and everybody else's less than it could be because of your self-centeredness. So then the self-centeredness becomes the problem. So in a theoretical sense, selfishness isn't so bad as long as you realize that the best way to optimize your selfish life is to give to other people. Then it works out. All right. So it fails. The self-centeredness fails because it's just going the wrong way. It's counterproductive to a social life. Now, if you were alone on an island by yourself, well, then it wouldn't matter a whole lot what you did or how you did it, or how giving or how self-centered you were. It would all be kind of moot because it's just you and maybe a palm tree, that's it. So if that's the case, then it's not all that important. But as soon as we have what I'll just call the collective, which is other people, a society, a country, a city, anything that is a collection of people living together in some form of society, now the whole has to be considered. It no longer can be just about you. And if everybody thinks that it's just about them, then that society will be very fractured. It won't work well. It won't have a good economy because economies run on trust. You can't have business. You can't make deals. You can't do things like that if there's no trust. It requires people to care for each other. So the point is that self-centeredness doesn't work except when you're alone on a desert island. If you're with other people, then other people need to be part of your consideration. And the fact is that if you study that more closely, you find out that the optimal situation for that collective is that if everybody cares about everybody else, that then is optimal, because everything that's positive gets shared. Burdens that are negative get shared. Everybody is working for everybody else. That's the optimal. So that's why self-centeredness just doesn't work. It just isn't, it's going the wrong directions. It's de-evolutionary. It's not optimizing. It's de-optimizing, or whatever that word is. It's a high entropy, not a low entropy kind of behavior. So that's why it doesn't work, and it can't work. That's why, let's say, governments that are totalitarian or fascist, or have the the warlord in charge, are unstable. They can't work because it's a society that's based on fear rather than a society based on love. And it can persist for some time, it may persist even for a century, but eventually it just disintegrates and falls apart because it's not stable. It sows the seeds of its own destruction. It self-destructs, and it will do that automatically and always do that. Okay, so that's why self-centeredness just doesn't work. Now, one thing to be careful of is when you see some people will do for others for the wrong reasons. If you're giving to other people because you just want to, it's just the way you are. It makes you feel good. You want to give to other people because that's where you find your happiness, is in giving. Then that giving is a wonderful thing, and everybody wins. If the reason you're giving to other people is because you're a martyr and you just give to other people because that builds up your credits, your martyr credits. Look at all the things I do. I work my fingers to the bone for you, and everybody owes you, and everybody will look up to you, and everybody will think you're wonderful because you just do for them all the time. So it's like the right actions, but for the wrong reasons. Or if you're doing for people because you feel you have to, it's an obligation. I need to do this because that's my role. It's my job. It's just my plight in life, to do this. Well, then that's the wrong reason as well. And eventually you get bitter and resent it. You do that, you're acting, you're not being, and eventually you get resentful and negative. I do everything for everybody else and nobody does anything for me. That's the martyr, or I work for you. And it's just what I do, but they're complaining about it, but they're doing it. So we have to be careful not to slip into those traps. But for people like your mother, who just do things for people because that's what she wants to do, that's the way she is. She would rather do that and not sleep than not do that. Sleep, you can get by on less sleep. You get by on less foods. You don't have to eat because you're busy serving other people. You just do it because that makes you happy. It's who you are. It's a true reflection of your high quality, you see. And now that person spreads love and spreads positiveness to everybody that's in their life, everybody that knows her, comes away a little better just for having known her. because she's the kind of person that pulls other people up. But as you think about doing for others, you have to make sure that it's because you want to, not because you think you should, or because you think that you must. If you think it's because you should or because you must, then eventually that'll wear out and bitterness will take its place. So we still have to take care of ourselves, of course, because we affect everybody else. So I heard somebody say, I just don't get it. So I'm supposed to, stop taking showers and baths and don't brush my teeth. And, I don't have to care about myself because I just need to take care of others. So I don't need to take care of myself because that would be evil, and it's like, no, of course not. If you don't take a bath and don't brush your teeth, that's not being nice to others, and if you don't make your bed or don't wash your dishes when you're done, that's not being nice to others, so of course you have to do all those things. You should live in a space that is neat and that is clean, because that's just more pleasant for everybody to live in, including you. And if you think, like a lot of teenagers do, that, well, I don't care much about neat and clean. I just want to throw my clothes all over the room and, banana peels under the bed and, whatever, that's good enough for me. I don't care. So if I don't care, why bother me? Mom, why make me clean it up? Well, it's because you affect other people. Your room eventually is gross. And if other people have to walk into it, it doesn't look nice. It's unkempt. It's disorderly. It smells, and so on. So in order to be nice to other people, you have to keep up with your personal business, your personal hygiene, the way whether you make your bed or not. Leave your house and your room looking such that it's pleasant for anybody to be in it. Well, nobody should be in my room. They need to stay out of my room. Well, no, it's part of the house. People have to go in there sometimes. Even the door gets left open. I'll lock the door. No, you have to care about the whole. You're part of a collective here, living in this house with all the other rooms in this house. And we're not going to build a little shed out in the backyard, for you to live in. So as long as it's here, you're going to have to do that, right? So a lot of teenagers go through that phase. But in any case, yes, you do have to pay attention to the things that you have to do. You have to, you have responsibilities. You have to take care of children. You have to pay the mortgage. You have to buy the food, or maybe you have to cook the meal, or whatever else has to be done. You may have to change the diapers or do the laundry or run errands. There's lots of things that need to be done. And if you do them because you want to be part of the solution and make the whole work, then great, you'll be happy doing them. If you're doing them because you think you have to, and it's your job, but you don't particularly want to, well, then you'll get resentful. And it won't work out very well. And if you say, well, okay, I'm working out because I'm working, everything's working out for everybody because I do all the work. I clean the house, I cook the meals, I take care of the kids, I do everything, I do all the work. Nobody else does anything. Everybody else lays around, watches TV while I work. If that's a problem for you, then you should stop. You should only do that if you really want to do that, because you want everybody to do what they're doing. That's about being authentic, not acting. Be authentic. If that bothers you, that other people are not doing their fair share, that you are becoming an enabler of bad behavior. Nobody else is taking responsibility, and that's not good for them not to take responsibility. Oh, well, you might say, I don't want to be an enabler for bad behavior. I don't want to raise a bunch of kids that, expect everybody else to do things for them. I want them to be able to wash their own clothes and make their own meals and wash their own dishes and do things. Then, because you care about them, you'll require that they make their beds, put their dirty laundry in the right place, and wash dishes and whatever else you can do. You're going to require that because that's good for them. You're not doing it because you resent having to do all the work. Wrong reason. You do it because you care about your kids and they need that sort of discipline. They need to feel like they're a part of the family and they have to do part of the work. You see? So it's easy for people to get crosswise with these ideas. Say, well, just doing things for people, no, that's terrible. You'll enable a lot of bad behavior. That's not right. Well, no. You have to really think about what is the low entropy solution? What in the long term is going to be the lowest entropy solution for everybody? Well, if you have a bunch of children who demand services, then that's high entropy. And doing their chores for them, so the poor little dears don't have to do anything themselves, that's not helpful in the long run. That's higher entropy to do that, not low entropy. So you gotta look at the whole system and the long term, and then look and see what's the low entropy course here. And if the low entropy course is for you to just work and help people and do that sort of thing, then fine, that's what you should do. If the low entropy course is that you need to lay down the law and you need to, start assigning tasks, then that's what you should do. But always take your best shot at what is the long-term low entropy solution. And that's what you do. And then you just do it. But always be aware of how that works. Always look back. In other words, always be skeptical that you actually have figured out what the low entropy solution is. Maybe you haven't. So always be skeptical and keep looking back and see, well, how's it working out? Is this good? And if it is, keep doing it. If it isn't, change. So the problem of I don't know what to do because I don't know what the low entropy solution is in the long term. No, just do the best you can and keep a watch on it. Be skeptical and change it as you need to. And eventually you will get to exactly where you need to go and will have done the absolute best to optimize the system you're living in. How's that, Elizabeth?
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I see a t-shirt in the future, no banana peels under the bed. I like it. You made me cry. I was laughing so much.
Oh, yeah. Well, that comes out of my own experience with my children. My son was like that. Banana peels, chicken bones, whatever.
Oh,
rather than pick them up and take them to a garbage can or something, you just put them where nobody can see them. So, boys have this idea that the way to optimize life is to do as little as you have to. It's just a boy thing. You probably don't understand that, but it's just a boy thing. You optimize life by doing as little as you have to. And they think it in terms of efficiency. Yeah. It's more efficiency if I can get this done, like tying your shoestrings. You're just going to untie them again at nighttime. So why bother tying them now? Just be more efficient to just leave them hang. Well, and if you trip over them, then cut them off, take the shoestrings out. Well, your shoes clump along. So, it's not a problem. It's just more efficient. So boys that are in between like 10 and, 15 or 16 or something kind of get into that efficiency thing. But anyhow, Yes, banana peels under the bed is a real thing.
It's my experience, Tom, that it lasts much longer than that.
I was trying to be kind, Sylvia. Yeah, it does last
At least
long.
in the Crawford household, we'll see. Maybe it's a genetic influence or past life influence on my voice only.
Yeah. Sylvia speaks from experience. She has 2 boys.
True.
So.
All right, well, let's move over to the next question. I know we have about 15 minutes left and 5 more questions. Don't know if we'll get through them all, but this is the second round that we're going into. So Linda, you want to start off?
I just wanted to give you a chance to circle back with me, Tom, because my question in March, you weren't able to answer on the spot as to whether NPCs know that they're NPCs. And but if you're still not ready to answer, I'll be back again in September, so I can give you some more time.
Well, I did think about that a little bit, and I did come up with an answer. Now I just have to remember it. So the question was, do NPCs know that they're NPCs? NPCs the NPC is not a individuated unit of consciousness. The NPC is the system playing that particular character. So it's not an individuated unit of consciousness logged on in order to make those choices. It's the system sending out a character into the physical to do something, or make some connection, or create a situation. It's something that the system's doing on purpose, and the system's aware of what it's doing. So the NPC itself probably sees itself as a being. It probably is not aware that its choices are being made by the system, because it's not aware necessarily even that there is a system. It just makes these choices. But what it knows is that it has a mission. It has specific things to do, specific role to fill, and it is very much focused on doing that role. So that is, the NPC would be something that somebody who's very focused on a very particular role and would not be aware that the system was making his choices. He would just feel like he was making all his own choices, just like anybody feels like. That's what you and I feel like. We're just making our own choices. We don't think, oh, I've got an IUOC and it's making all my choices. We don't think that, and the NPC wouldn't think that either. But it would be the larger conscious system that we're making the choices, not an IUOC. But that would be transparent to the NPC. So no, they would not know that they were somehow different, other than that they know that they are more focused and more, programmed, or what would we say, planned for what it is they need to do.
They have no choice in the matter.
That they're just very strongly urged to do what they need to do. They probably still could be contrary to that, but it would be difficult for them to be contrary to that. They've got all the strong nudges to fulfill their mission, but they wouldn't be aware of it. But they know they were different in the sense that I'm not like other people. They'd have that because they'd see other people could do this, could do that, could do all kinds of things, but they're right on target for what it is they need to do, the role they have to serve.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we have Faisal had a question. He had to leave, but his question, he says that the other day he used a search tool, put in Nikola Tesla, and was surprised that no one asked you about him. Do you have any perspective on his life's work and him as a scientist? Could some of his more out there experiments have contributed towards a better understanding of MBT and reality, in your opinion?
Yeah, Nikola Tesla was a very interesting guy, and we have a lot of conflicting things written about him. So it's a little difficult to know exactly who he was. He didn't write a very detailed autobiography that told us how he felt. He was an inventor. He created he had a lot of great ideas. And if you believe some of the stories, Thomas Edison stole a lot of those ideas and put them into the world. He also was very troubled. He had difficulties dealing with his existence, with life, with people. He also obviously had a very strong intuitive sense. He was not just left brain. He had a very strong right brain sense, which is where he got a lot of his creativity and his good ideas from. He was connected. He tended to see big pictures, but he also tended to be a little manic sometimes and depressive and a little OCD. So a very interesting character that has lots of dimensions to him, but no doubt he was brilliant. No doubt he was an excellent scientist. No doubt he had a big picture. One of the quotes that I can't quote it exactly, but I can get close from him is that when the world realizes or understands that the non-physical, then it will progress more, like in the next month or the next day or in the next year than it has all through time up to this point. In other words, just once people understand the sense of non-physical, he didn't actually put it in terms of a larger consciousness system, but that's what he's thinking about, this bigger picture where the non-physical exists. He says, once they understand that and that becomes science, we'll start to make great strides. So I was somebody who had a bigger picture, who saw reality in a way that most of his peers couldn't even begin to comprehend. So definitely a great mind, a great thinker, a great scientist, but troubled in many ways. So all of his ideas weren't necessarily brilliant because he also had a little OCD going on in the background, maybe a little schizophrenia, who knows, but issues. But, that's another interesting thing. A lot of people who have made very significant fundamental contributions have also been kind of outside of the society. So he was kind of an outsider in his own society. We think of Gödel, who, I don't know if you've heard of his incompleteness theorem, but it's basically a fundamental theorem in mathematics that he came up with at the age of like 23 or something. And it was very, very impressive. Some of the work that was done in the early days about cryptography, computing, digital functioning, a lot of that was done by people who were way out in front, ahead of their time, back in the 50s, 60s. And these people also had issues with life. I think both of those, the two I'm thinking of, Gödel ended up, I think, committing suicide. And well, so did Tesla, I think, for that matter. And so did this guy who did all the computer work. His name doesn't come to me right now. Alan Turing. Alan Turing. He also was brilliant, but was outside of his society. He didn't fit in. He was different. And because he was different, he was treated, same with Gödel, and same with Tesla, he was treated harshly. He was given a hard time. He was in some ways persecuted just because he was different, but yet he was a genius that contributed much. So that's almost a pattern, that you can see that people who make tremendous contributions are often, they do that because they aren't completely integrated into our culture. They don't just accept the norms. They don't swallow hook, line, and sinker all the beliefs that their culture would have them swallow. They're outsiders that don't fit in. Now, Einstein was not like that. Einstein was a brilliant man, a brilliant scientist, but he fit into his culture and society, or at least he acted like he did, which I think is another point. Those people who are very much outsiders in their own cultures often realize that and don't let it show. Keep it to themselves. They still make their big contributions, but they keep their fundamental strangeness to themselves. And that just shows that they are a little wiser than the ones that kind of let their strangeness out and then have to deal with the effect of the majority who cannot tolerate differences. So that's all I know about Tesla. You know, great mind, sad story.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Tom. We have 4 minutes left. Can we just sneak in one last question from Georgie?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So last question, Georgie, you're up.
Thank you. So when I look back on my life, 4 or 5 years of my life, it seems to me that I've made some progress and I lowered my personal entropy some. But now for past year or year and a half, I feel like I have plateaued in my personal evolution. My question is, to what extent do I need to take action to challenge myself and go out there and try to evolve more? And to what extent do I have to just sit back and let things happen and try to meet those challenges that come to me, try to deal with the challenges that come to me in the best way I can? And to what extent do I act, and to what extent do I wait for challenges?
Good. That's a good question. And the answer to that is just follow your intuition. Don't follow your intellect. If your intellect tries to make this choice, oh, I need to get out and do some action because I've plateaued, you probably do all the wrong things for the wrong reasons. It's much better if you just let it come as it comes. Now, I would guess that in any one of those years in the last 5 years, had you at that time looked at your life, you would have come to the conclusion that you were plateaued. Every one of those years, you would have said, oh, I'm just kind of not doing anything here. I'm just kind of keeping on, and nothing much is happening. And every one of those 5 years, you would have said that when you were in that year. And now here you are looking at it and saying, well, I just seem like I've plateaued and keeping on, nothing much is happening. And 5 years from now, you'll look back at it and you'll say, wow, yeah, 5 years ago, I really learned a lot, you know? So it's just a matter of perspective for the most part. When you look at over the short term, which is over maybe a year or two, you don't see much. When you look back over 5 years, it's pretty obvious you've grown a lot. You look back over 10 years, it's even more obvious that you've grown a lot. But at any one moment, you generally feel like not much is going on, not much is happening. And that's because it's not about doing. It's not the doing thing that's making a difference. It's the being thing. And that being grows and changes subtly and slowly, but consistently. As long as you are aware that you have things to learn, that you have fears to work on, you know, beliefs to get rid of. If you're just kind of aware of the situation that you have challenges to meet, relationships to grow into, and that life is about learning and growing and making good choices. If you just have that awareness, then that will optimize your growing more than anything else. But we look at the doing. What am I doing now? what have I been doing? Well, I haven't been doing anything much that makes me grow up. So then you feel inadequate because I'm just not doing much. I'm wasting my time. What should I be doing? No, but you're busy being, whether you know it or not. You're always busy being. It's just, you can't get away from being unless you go on that island by yourself with the one coconut palm. That's the only place you could go where you're not busy being. But if you're in this world at all, you're interacting with other people. You're interacting with, you need to have a job, you need to have, you have family, you have friends, you have bosses and coworkers, you have neighbors, you have all these people you interact with, and all of those people give you opportunities every day to make good choices or to make bad choices every day. And by those choices, you grow up. You change who you are. You become, as long as you're aware that you need to grow up and that you see these choices as choices. And the more that you're aware that the choices you're making are actually choices, and it's not just, robot you going through life, working like a robot, which we do sometimes, when we just stop thinking about what we're doing or why we're doing it. We just go through life on automatic. If we do that, then we probably don't learn much because we're just on automatic. But in as much as you're present with who you are and what you're doing, the relationships, the value of them to you, if you're aware of your life and the things in it, and you're aware of your need to grow and to meet challenges, then you will optimize your rate of growth. You'll just never see it because it'll be happening very suddenly. And you don't get oh, look, today I've changed. I'm a changed person now. Yesterday I was this way, and now today I'm different. It hardly ever happens like that. It's just a slow, subtle process. Whereas you make this mistake 10 times a day, and then you only make the mistake 8 times a day. And then, next month you only make it 4 times a day. And pretty soon you're not making it at all. But you didn't really notice because it was just over such a slow, subtle amount of time that you change. But each time you make fewer mistakes, then you've grown up just a little more. So I'd say you're doing just fine. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to go out and pursue it. If you pursue it from the intellect, because the intellect thinks it needs to go do something, you will probably do the wrong things for the wrong reasons, and it will not be so productive. So just stay aware of who and what you are, where you are, that you are learning, that all life is a challenge. Everything is a challenge. Meet that challenge with the low entropy solution, and then just let everything else take place as it does. Let all the chips fall wherever they may. Stay aware of how those chips are falling. Are they good ones? Are they low entropy? Or do I need to do things better? And remember, anything that isn't working is yours to fix, not somebody else's. So never blame anybody else for things that aren't going well in your life. You need to fix all those things in your life. So as long as you take responsibility, don't live your life as a zombie, and just try, then you're optimized. You can't get much better than that. So you're doing fine. Don't get into trying too hard to push on it, because that usually just messes it up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. This is fantastic. Wanted to just pass it over to Titti. I think Titti has a few words to say for the volunteers.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for you who is watching this, this Q&A was an activity within the context of the MBT volunteer community. And our aim is to support Tom's work and help spreading the MBT messages in creative ways, I could say. So if you're interested in to know more about our community, please send an email to mbtvolunteers@gmail.com and we'll take it from there. So thank you everyone for joining. It's been a wonderful evening.
It has indeed. I've enjoyed all of you. Yes, thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Mm.
Thank you, Tom.
You're quite welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you.
See you the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Next
everyone.
time.
Thank you for all the great questions.
Yes. good
Yeah,
questions.
thank you.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.